Rush Limbaugh. I voted for Bush in 2000, and I joined the Army because of September 11th for revenge. So look at me now. You can imagine what kind of change I've been through. And seeing that change in myself, I know that change in the world can happen, because when I came back from Iraq, I told myself I'm never going to put anybody above me or below me ever again. That's the way we're going to make a change, seeing everybody as equals and not doing this power trip that U.S. foreign policy has, or in our own very lives when we look to make a change, when we reach out to people who, disagree with us. It's welcome to the good fight. Well, order of the day is, of course, the occupations in Afghanistan, Iraq, the drone bombings in Pakistan. I mean, this whole policy is brought up due to the majority of Americans not realizing their connection to this very war. And you may not be the one pulling the trigger in Afghanistan or flying the drone over Pakistan, but our taxes pay for this. Our real tax dollars turn into real bullets that kill real people. And there's legislature out there, the Peace Tax Fund Act, and I'm looking for a good lawyer so we can sue the government, because it violates my conscience objection status within the Army. It says that I can no longer participate in war, but that's being violated to this day.
Obama declared the, what was the word he used? Combat operations in Iraq to be over, which I thought was interesting, because President Bush did that back in May 2003. But what's similarly, though, it's, I mean, it was a fucking lie then, and it's a fucking lie now. We're still going to be engaged in combat on the ground. The big difference, though, is that we're no longer going to be performing humanitarian missions. So the 50,000 troops in Iraq, as they continue to patrol areas, they're just not going to be building schools and doing humanitarian stuff, the stuff that really helps build a nation after we bombed the hell out of it. So I want to give a little bit of a history about Veterans for Peace and Iraq Veterans Against the War. Back in Vietnam, there was a group called Vietnam Veterans Against the War, and in the 1980s that became Veterans for Peace. But there's a longer history than that. I passed out a book to most of you guys in the audience just a little bit ago by Smedley Butler. Back after World War I, he organized veterans as well in order to fight for rights and to advocate for peace. And this is a long history of the veterans movement, and it's a movement we try and continue today. We haven't experienced war through whatever reason, now advocate for peace. And it's an important mission, and it's a mission that veterans have. And so it's my job to try and advocate for them. As far as Iraq Veterans Against the War goes, on the national level, we just launched a campaign on October 7th called Operation Recovery. And for as ridiculous and crazy as it sounds, the United States military will actually deploy wounded soldiers back into combat. If you're diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder or military sexual trauma or traumatic brain injury, you can still be sent back into a military combat zone. And this happens extremely frequently. We actually have a member here in Portland who, after his second tour to Iraq, he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and the only reason he got out of his third deployment, and this is after, when he got diagnosed with PTSD, he was told he was not able to hold a weapon anymore. But he was still being sent off to another deployment. So that's the situation in the military right now, and Operation Recovery by the national organization is trying to prevent that. And I'd be happy to talk with you folks more on an individual level about that and how you can help. So I hope you guys got my book. It's called War is a Racket. And the big message of that is that war is about profiteering. It's always been about profiteering. And it's still going to continue to be about profiteering for the extremely wealthy. And it shouldn't be a coincidence that as we wage a war, that the entire country is in poverty. Everybody is just totally fucked right now. I mean, nobody has a job. It's 10% unemployment rate. The veterans getting back with the Oregon Army National Guard have a 50% unemployment rate. I mean, that's the state of the affairs, and it's directly attributable to the war. And a lot of people try to ignore that, but we need to be honest with them and tell them exactly how it is and what's really going on.
We're here today for the Money for Jobs and Education, Not War and Occupation rally. One of the reasons that we've been brought out here today is because we demand the end of the occupations of Afghanistan and Iraq. We demand that you that the U.S. government stop funding Israeli apartheid. And we want equal rights for Palestinians. We demand no war on Iran or Pakistan and stop the drone bombings. We demand that we stop scapegoating Arabs, Muslims, and immigrants and blaming them for our country's problems. It needs to stop. We demand that we keep our government keeps their hands off of Latin America.
Occupied resistance is justified when people are occupied. 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 Resistance is justified when people are occupied.
We're all here today because there's actually two great wars being waged upon the people of the world. One is the war waged by the richest people in this country against the rest of the world. And the other is the war waged by the very same people who are running a giant Ponzi scheme against us. And they have so far succeeded in piling up war after occupation after coup on our backs. For 30 years they have succeeded, and they've seen their profits climb, their taxes reduced, while we have seen our real wages stagnate, while the reforms our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents fought for are slashed from one year to the next in the name of fiscal responsibility. Amid all the talk of budget cuts, there's one budget that only grows, the military. And we're supposed to consider it reform when that budget only increases 2 or 3% each year? While we're taking furlough days and pay cuts, if we even have a job, they find $1 trillion a year to spend on things that most of us do not want. If there's money for 9 years in Afghanistan, there's money for the 1,600 teachers Oregon has lost in the past 2 years. If there's money for funding CIA adventures like the coup in Venezuela in 2002, there's money for daycare assistance for 7,000 Oregon families. If there's money for 1,000 military bases around the world, there's money for food stamps for the 1 in 5 Oregonians who currently use them. If there's money for 20 armed drone attacks against Pakistan just last month, there's money for 26,000 state employees to come back to work. If there's money to support Israel's ongoing siege of Gaza, there's money for thousands of home health care workers to provide assistance to the elderly and people with special needs. If there's money for FBI raids on anti-war activists, then there's money for unemployment insurance. The cuts to Oregon's social services didn't start with this economic crisis in 2008. They've been ongoing for decades. At the same time, the war machine continues to grow. And while the U.S. makes up less than 5% of the world's population, we spend over 40% of the world's military expenses. The choice, of course, to us today here is obvious. It's not a hard choice, as the Oregonian proposes, between feeding people and keeping schools open. It's an easy choice between providing services to those who need them and promoting death, destruction, and despair around the world. But President Obama's Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform has been nicknamed the Cat Food Commission, since that's what we'll be eating when the expected budget cuts take aim at Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. decidedly not on the Commission's list of hard choices was ending the wars and occupations. And thankfully, 49 congressmen signed on to a letter to the Commission suggesting that maybe we look at making some military cuts. Nothing too drastic, of course, but that we should gradually review and trim down the exorbitant spending on for-profit contractors, or perhaps reevaluate what the U.S. mission in the world is in the first place. And that's great advice, but we have to go further. We demand an end to the wars now. We demand an end to funding coups and occupations around the world now. We demand all the troops and private contractors and the base personnel come back now. Not in 2 years after the 2012 election, not in 10 years, but immediately. Because we need the money now. Not in 2 years after we've lost our jobs, our health care, after they've gutted our schools and our life savings, but right now. Regardless of who is elected in a few weeks, there will be more budget cuts on the way. But rather than fighting each other over the scraps, we can put forward a solution in the wars. It's our job to get that solution into the streets, talked about in the news, talked about at the dinner tables. And our task may be difficult, but it's not idealistic, it's not unfeasible. After all, the majority of the population is already with us. They just don't think they have a say, or perhaps they think that eventually, gradually, the U.S. military will wither away given the right politicians. But we know that the United States empire is not going to disarm on its own. The military exists to keep Blackwater and Halliburton rich. It exists to keep the control of natural resources in a few hands. It exists to help despots put down popular uprising. It exists and it is powerful, but it's not immune to public opinion. It's not immune to the dissatisfaction and disillusionment of its soldiers, and it's clearly not immune to the international resistance that occurs daily by the poorest of the world's people in a fight to control their own lives. These wars exist to line the pockets of a very few, and these budget cuts are a result of the decisions of those very few over decades to pay people less and make more profits for themselves. So if we're asked, what else can we do to save our social services beyond ending the wars and occupations? Tax the warmongers and tax the rich.
Stop the killing, stop the war!
We don't want it anymore!
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 Stop the killing, stop the hate!
Stop the killing, stop the hate!
Stop the killing, stop the hate!
I look around this crowd and I know most of you understand very well the situation in Israel-Palestine. The dispossession of the Palestinian people began well before the independence of Israel. In 1948, tens of thousands of Palestinians were driven from their homes, and then in 1967 the dispossession took another leap forward as people were driven from their land in this ongoing process of illegal settlements in the West Bank and in Gaza. And although the settlements in Gaza have been removed, the occupation continues through the blockade as people are immiserated by these policies of the Israeli government, policies that are made possible, that are emboldened by the policy of our country, the United States of America. We pay for the occupation, we pay for the settler-only roads, we pay for the settlement expansions. And we've watched with grim cynicism, I must say, as we watch the Obama administration attempt to re-energize this so-called peace process, but knowing full well that the policies of the Israeli government are not going to change. They're not going to change until the policies of the United States changes in such a way that there is a cost to the expansion of these settlements. There is a cost to the continued aggressive attacks on civilians in Gaza and southern Lebanon, that there is a cost imposed by the United States. A cutoff of military aid is the very first step that we could take, but there are so many other steps that we can take. We had the privilege of meeting with Senator Merkley this last week, and I can tell you that we have a lot of work to do to turn around the policies as they are enacted through our Congress. Every time a Dear Colleague letter is written in support of, for example, the attack on the flotilla that killed so many courageous activists who are simply trying to break the blockade against Gaza. These Dear Colleague letters can stop. They can stop because we will make sure that our elected officials understand that the American people, the people in this country, do not approve of the policies of the Israeli government and want a dramatic change to the U.S. policies that support the continuing dispossession of Palestinian people and the continued war crimes and crimes against humanity that are committed by the Israeli government. So I appeal to everybody here who understands very well that peace in Israel and Palestine, a just peace for the Palestinians, can only come about if there is pressure from this country, that we will take the steps necessary to change this country's policy. It's a long road ahead, but we must take each step that brings us along towards eventually a just peace for the Palestinian people. Their patience is immeasurable. Each time I've traveled to the Gaza Strip, I've been welcomed with open arms by people who have borne the brunt of this occupation. It is so little that we can do, so little that it takes for us to move this genuine peace process forward. Thank you for being out here today. Thank you for fighting for peace in Israel-Palestine.
We want Latino, Arab nation and white. No racist war, no more. Defend our civil rights. They want black, Latino, Arab nation and white. No racist war, no more. Defend our civil rights. They want.
My question is, what would you guys do with $1 billion if you guys had it? Well, the U.S. last year spent $1,153,500,093 in military and police aid in Latin America with the purpose to fight a drug war. A war that has allowed the U.S. to establish 7 military bases in Colombia and trying to militarize the border by 1,000 troops, a naval base in Post Camp, Honduras, 7,000 Marines and 46 warships to Costa Rica. All that and no sign of improvement of war and drug usage. So, we know they mean to undermine the unions, the campesinos, and the left turn in Latin America. So again, what would we do with $1 billion? Yes, fund schools, education, jobs, instead of the repression of social movements in Latin America or empire. So U.S. hands off Latin America.
How many of you have taken an action to support unions in Colombia? How many of us support a free Palestine? They're making this a crime. I just want to say, we're against the war in Afghanistan, we're against the wars of aggression all over the world, we're against preparation for war in Latin America, and we have to be watching what's going on with this grand jury because it's going to make all of our activities criminal.
I'm going to directly assume that Islamophobia is a real diagnosis and see, let's study it together kind of thing. So every diagnosis basically have a cause and symptoms and a cure and sometimes prevention, So, well, I don't know if I missed the part, I'm not a doctor. I happen to be an engineer. Okay. I don't want to start with the cause. Let's leave it aside. You'll know why. Symptoms, you'll get people saying Islam is the religion of the devil. Suddenly we're the religion of the devil. And you get people, wanting to burn the Quran, which is what I'm holding right now, and stuff like that. And you know what? I don't blame them. I don't blame them, and just wait, don't worry. I'll fix this. Let's talk about the cure. The cure is the Quran itself. If you read it, you will not find, if you can find any words of, kill, murder, whatever, do. That's not there, you know, in case you haven't noticed, you know. And if you don't know, just read it, you know. And I didn't get this at Walgreens. It's a cure, but, you know, you don't get it at Walgreens or CVS pharmacy, you know. Read it, and you'll notice that it talks about loving the neighbor, respect the elder, and what it says about killing, it says, if you kill one person, it's like killing all humanity. Oh, it sounds very bad. That's the devil itself talking. You know? And, you know, by the way, when we start reading one of the ayat, which is any part of the Quran, we say, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, which means I ask God to prevent me from the devil. Yeah, sounds, you know, it is the devil itself talking. Yeah. That's the cure. Now, going back to the cause, if this is talking about peace, then the cause is not this. This is not the cause of Islamophobia. The cause is our media, you know. From Disney movies to news articles, you'll find it, you know. Everybody has watched Aladdin, you know, and you can't have missed the scene where Jasmine was giving the poor little kid that apple, and the guy had to hold her hand and he wanted to cut it. First of all, this is a Disney movie. We're assuming kids are watching it. Is it necessary to put such a scene? And is it true? Does it really happen? It doesn't, you know. You know, go look, I don't know if you can find something like that. That's a Disney movie. Let's move on to Hollywood. There's a movie called Babel. You know, it's for Brad Pitt, and I don't know who else. I think Angelina Jolie was in there, and which is why I watched it. But, and it shows really unnecessary scenes of kids doing stuff. I don't want to even mention it because there's probably some kid around here, you know. And you know, and last month I think I watched the movie called The Town, and there's a part where the detective says we can't hold anything against the robbers unless one of them converts to Islam. You know, that might seem like a joke for you, but this repeating that stuff all this time, you know, in every, not in every movie, but in most movies and shows and video clips and whatever, it's repeating in your head. Suddenly, unconsciously, you'll start believing that Muslims are actually like that, you know? Even if you deny it right now, you'll notice that you'll start thinking it to the point where the blood of Muslims will seem cheaper to you. And when you hear about war in Iraq, you'll be like, whatever, you know, I don't care. Because their blood is cheaper now. If it happened in Portland, you'll be like protesting and burning tires or whatever, you know? So, prevention, moving on to prevention, we have to be aware of our media, you know? Are you all right? Okay. So when we watch any kind of show or read any news article, when you see bombing and whatever, and then they have to add the word Islam. So when a Muslim does something, Islam has to be pointed out. But when someone else does anything, there's no Christian, there's no Jew, no. But when it's Muslims, Islam, you know? And you know, if you're aware of that, that's the first step of not getting the Islamophobia. That's your cure. They say prevention is the best way, you know, and that's your prevention. Just be aware of what's going on. We can't be all the time ignorant and whatever is happening, you know. No, be aware of what's going on. You can't just spend all your life on music and some people are dying out there.
For the mess that we're in because they've lied to us. Woo! That's right. So, who really, if they're not the media, if they've let us down, who really is the media? Who's going to tell us the truth? It's us. It's you. We are the media. We are the ones that got to get the truth out. Yeah. We are the ones that got to stop this war. We got to correct the truth. No more lies. 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 Now is the chance to get behind media outlets that are not beholden to the almighty dollar. Media outlets like KBOO, who are here for you. We are your radio station. We are your media outlet. We are going to tell you what you need to know. We're not going to tell you what their advertisers want you to know. Yeah. No more lies. No more lies. No more lies.